In high school, we had an opportunity to go to England with our school band, which was an extraordinary experience, and it brought me to Europe, and I got to see all the cathedrals and learn so much about history. We even got to go to Hadrian's Wall and learn about Roman history. It really shaped my world perspective being able to go on that wonderful trip thanks to our fantastic band director, Mr. Dolan. While we were in Edinburgh, Scotland, we, meaning my friends and I, it was Pete, Zach, there was a few of us, we wanted to try our hand at busking. And so we got these high-vis vests like you would do construction work. And we bought them at some random shop, had these high-visibility vests, and we went out with our saxophones and whatever we had, and we went on one of the main drag streets where busking happens in Edinburgh. And we start playing saxophone and playing our random jams. A guy walks up to us after about 10 minutes with a guitar in his hand, and he goes, Guys, this is ridiculous. You're so loud. You come out here with saxophones and everything. You're just wailing away. I'm trying to make some money. You got to keep it down. That's ridiculous. This is so rude. And he packs up his guitar and he goes home. And that was our first introduction to the gear gig etiquette and how we had not done it correctly, because this was a guy whose livelihood was going out and playing on the street. We had no idea. We just thought everybody goes out on the street and has a jam. We went out, we started playing. This guy was very upset that clearly these loud Americans in high visibility vests were playing saxophones and drums and all sorts of stuff. So we got taught a lesson that day about how you have to respect the gig, respect the gear etiquette of the gig. And that's what we're talking about today on Earth Tones episode 10, the open mic gear etiquette. But first, on Earth Tones episode 10, a sound from our beautiful Earth. That was some crickets and, of course, a little airplane going by, probably a big airplane going by. That was in Ipswich, recorded a few weeks ago. I love the sound of the crickets sitting by the campfire. All right, today we're talking about how to survive, how to be, nice to the people around you when it comes to gear while still being able to get your sound together. Before that, a bit of old news. Miss Sadie Dupuis from Speedy Ortiz and Sad 13. This is an interview with her on Tape Op number 142. This copy, I think, was in the back of a car or left in the rain or something like that. It's pretty wrinkly. I opened it up and I read this fantastic article. I'm sure you can find this online. An interview with Sadie Dupuis all about recording at home. And so she had put out her album, Haunted Painting. So she is an indie rock singer-songwriter, front person of Speedy Ortiz, and she would record at home, and then in the article she talks all about going into all these major studios. But she's really fantastic. If you check out the album, Haunted Painting, or anything from Speedy Ortiz, it's super cool. The guitar tones, a lot of fuzz guitar, but the orchestration and everything of it is really fantastic. So I'm interested in home recording techniques, all that type of stuff. And the old news is, the release of that album, Haunted Painting. But in general, the new news is I am super into Speedy Ortiz now and Sadie Dupuis. I think she's fantastic. She's got a super cool voice. She's got a really interesting history. She studied poetry. She's put out full-length poetry books, and her music is super rad. In fact, if you want to get into it, check out the Tiny Desk, the NPR Tiny Desk of Speedy Ortiz. They are fantastic, super cool. And one of the things that she's been doing is making albums where she hires exclusively female engineers, and women are very underrepresented in audio engineering. So over the years, as she met people, she connected with them between management, mixing, mastering, recording engineering, and many of the members of her band. It's an all-female production crew, which is pretty awesome. So the main discussion today on Earth Tones episode 10 is gear etiquette at the open mic. Okay, here's my blog post about it. You walk into the open mic. They're happy to see you. Are you here for the open mic? Yes, we'd like to sign up. Okay, great. You're 10th. Cool. We have a couple amps. Is that okay? It's just a matter of plugging in everything, you know? Yeah, no problem. We don't have to. If you really want, you can. No, we'll be fine. Thanks. The open mic gear etiquette. You want to sound good. You want to be heard, and ideally hear yourself. How do we play it cool and get our sound together? That's the subject of today. How do you play it cool and get your sound together? You want to go out there and you want to play. You want to be able to do your thing. You want to express yourself. You definitely want to be able to hear yourself and put on the best performance you can. You've been practicing so much at home, but you don't want to go in there and be a prima donna. What I've learned is when you go, whether it's an open mic or a show, especially if you're an opening act, if you start being too demanding, there is a point where you're actually doing yourself a disservice because the engineers are going to start to resent you and they're not going to help you whatsoever. So a couple of tips. First of all, always keep in mind how to make it easy for somebody else. The more you make someone else's job easier and you make sure that they know that you appreciate them, the more likely you'll be able to have things go well. We went to an open mic last night and some people had tracks on their phone. Some people had some very interesting instruments that were like homemade type of instruments that had special hookups like wireless. Some people even had pedal boards. So it's not out of the ordinary to have some special accommodation, but it's all about your attitude about it. Part of it is trusting that the people who are running it have been doing it for a long time and just be cool with them and know that they've heard a lot more music in that room than you have. And part of it's just a matter of being able to make it easy. So if you can be in tune already, you can walk up, you have your own cable or whatever you might need. You might not need that. You might be able to just plug straight in, but just be cool, man. If you can be cool and be accommodating, that's great. There's a few things like if you learn the folks' names. That was something I learned from Livingston Taylor's book about performing. If you're going to go into a place, as soon as you can, learn folks' names. I'm not great at remembering people's names, so what I do is I meet them, I make sure I use their name within the first couple of minutes, and then I just start a note in my phone that says the people at this venue's names. And that helps me to be able to chat with folks and actually get to know them, because if you know their name, then you can say, "Hey, Steve, I would like a little less bass in my guitar. Is that possible?" "Yeah, sure, Jake, no problem." If you're on a first-name basis with these folks, then you're just chatting, you're making things happen, it's all good. So learn folks' names, be nice, be accommodating, and then also be prepared to not hear yourself, and be prepared if the worst should happen and you can't get your sound together, to be able to roll with it. I saw something recently, they were talking about Eric Clapton's Rig Rundown on one of those YouTube channels, and they were talking about the acoustic set that he plays at his shows and how ideally he wants to be mic'd up, but they do have pickups in the guitars if they need them. And they said the biggest difficulty with that is to be able to do monitoring and to be able to not have feedback, because if you have a mic, and imagine Clapton's playing at a huge arena. If you've got a mic on an acoustic guitar where there's light finger picking in a place where there's 20,000 people in a blaring sound system, the odds of you having feedback are extremely high. So they'd like to go direct if they can, but Clapton wants to be mic'd if he can. And so they said that there are times where the monitoring doesn't work out and they have to essentially cut the monitors in order to avoid the feedback. And the person doing the interview, I wish I remember who it was, but they were saying, well, whenever that happens, Clapton just says, look, go without the monitors. Back in the day, we didn't have monitors anyways. If you look at the Beatles at Shea Stadium, that's always what folks will tell you or point to. They didn't have monitors at all back in the day, and yet all of their harmonies were perfectly in tune, and everything sounded great. And it goes to show you that you might not get the best sound, and you need to be prepared to not have great sound and still be able to play. That means having your thing totally together before you get on stage. Now, you can obviously go to the open mic and try some things out too, but just be willing to roll with the punches is what I'd say. And that applies to backline. If you go to a festival, find out what works. Figure out how you can get your sound from the most general things. If you're a guitar player, you got to know how to get your sound out of one of those Fender Hot Rod 410 type of combo situations. If you can't get a sound out of that works, then you're going to be in trouble when you have to, because you will have to, 100%. All right, for the musical demonstration today, this was my idea. Music will come out of something naturally if you give it a chance. So imagine as a prompt. We talked about AI. We talked about, different ways to create something out of nothing. One of them is rhythm. Imagine we just choose a tempo. Now, the initial tempo that I might think of is like 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But okay, that's my initial tempo. How about we forget that and I choose something? I could either type it into the metronome app here. Imagine I choose something random. Well, it's not so random if I am familiar with it, but say 130. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that didn't exist at all until I just used tempo as a way to give me a prompt. That can be cool because there might be some things that you feel internally, and we want to develop the sense of playing whatever we hear inside, of course, but you'd be surprised what you can respond to also. There's a lot of different prompts that you could use. They might be something like a lyrical idea or a picture or anything really that could trigger some response. But tempo is one of those cool ones, and if it might take you a while to be able to lock into something, but you can start with something super simple. It could just be like what I started with, which was just I just heard that rhythm being played at that tempo. What I found is if I set a metronome to a random type of, beats per minute, it might take a minute, but if I keep playing along with that, I'll usually come up with something. And it comes from somewhere that I wouldn't have tapped into because I just deliberately chose a feel. Not even a feel, just a tempo. And the feel I just hear at that speed. So give that a shot. Just try a totally random tempo and playing along and see if something settles into a groove there. All right, what's on the turntable this week? What's on the turntable? How about this? Jimi Hendrix, The Cry of Love. This was the first posthumous Jimi Hendrix album. It was released March 5th, 1971. Man, there are a lot of great songs on this. So over the years, I don't know if I'm kind of an archivist in a way when it comes to Jimi Hendrix, but I was going to say a purist when it comes to, listening mostly to the albums that Jimi made himself. In other words, that he oversaw from start to finish the involvement of the tracks and the track order and everything. And so posthumous albums I haven't listened, I've listened to everything, but I haven't given as much attention to, I'd suppose. But there are songs that come from these that end up being legendary. Once I started looking at the actual tracks of The Cry of Love, Freedom, Easy Rider, Angel, those three, Nightbird Flying too, are, to me, very big Jimi Hendrix songs. There's a couple on here like Drifting. I think when I was younger, I might have seen Drifting as almost like too complicated, like it had a lot of chords and everything like that. But now I hear it, I'm like, wow, that's another super great, kind of like what I think of as the orchestral side of Jimi Hendrix, with all the chord changes, like Angel, songs that have a little bit more going on in terms of their like flow and when he's feeling a lot of chords. And then there's interesting songs like Belly Button Window, where he's talking about like being in a womb. It's like a blues song, but he's like cosmically looking out the belly button window of this cosmic womb that he's in. Amazing. Cry of Love. And of course, this was mostly produced at Electric Lady Studio, where he was recording at the very end of his life. March 5th, 1971. So The Cry of Love, amazing album. And I'm very grateful that Eddie Kramer and Mitch Mitchell and Buddy Miles, all the guys that were around to be able to still contribute to making this music, were there to keep the legacy alive. It must have been challenging to be so close to Jimmy's passing and be marketing an album, mixing and releasing it. I mean, 6 months later, they're putting out that music. So, I mean, a lot of things go into putting an album together. They must have still very much been grieving while they were working on that music. To finish off, something that helped me this week, going in on a crazy level of detail. This week I was working on singing a lot, and I was thinking about vowels. I was learning Layla, actually. I was learning the acoustic version of Layla and singing along with the very specific syllables, listening to Clapton and mimicking certain things and working on my own relationship with these vowels. I'm trying to get like my eyes to sound more smooth because I kind of like put them up into my nose. I do like more of an ah than an ah. And when you look at these crazy level of details like the word I, which is really ah-e, it's unbelievable the amount of detail you can zoom in on. And by working on that, I think in the past I used to think that level of detail, you know, who's got time for that? We've got a lot of songs we have to learn. The beauty of zooming in that far of how you shape exactly a word is that it will inform how you sing everything else. So if you're working on a song or a piece and you're thinking, I'm so zoomed in on this specific thing, and you feel like you're sort of losing the big picture, I would encourage you to just stick with it, because by the time you zoom back out to the whole song, your relationship with your instrument, whether it's your voice or a guitar or anything, it's going to be profoundly changed by having really gone in and checked out something extremely specific. Say it's something like a chord. That's a C6 chord. If you really think about hearing the relationship of the notes within that, you'll hear that major second inside that chord. When you hear the whole thing by itself, it sounds to me just like a group of C6 sounds. But when you hear them individually, it's really interesting. So don't be afraid to really zoom in on some extreme details, and you'd be surprised how it can help you with the big picture, even if you're focused on something very small. So that is episode 10, talking about the gig etiquette of gear at the open mic or busking, that kind of stuff. Just be respectful, read the room. Thank you for listening. As always, please visit jakepardee.com to sign up for the newsletter and maritimerecording.com to take some guitar lessons or to record your music here at Maritime. Thank you for listening. Again, I am Jake Pardee. I'll be signing off here. And as always, I want to remind you that we are a fantastically musical species on a joyfully musical planet. And so glad that we are. I will see you next time. This was Earth Tones episode 10. See you next week.